You know, I
All
wish I could.
right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our workshop. Welcome to ASSI's monthly workshop. I'm Vanessa Frank, and I'm so glad you could join us today. We've all had those days in sterile processing where surprise loaners show up, the clock is ticking, and suddenly you're scrambling to stay on top of the workload. Well, today, let's talk about hitting the reset button. This man really needs no introduction and knows exactly how to stop that chaos before it starts. With 36 years in the field, he has mastered the art of eliminating last minute loaners, staying ahead of demand, and keeping turnaround fast without sacrificing quality. Dave Jagrosi, thank you for joining us today and take it away.
Thanks for having me. And listen, I apologize to the audience. I had nothing but technical problems last week, so I appreciate all of you for retuning back in this week. But hopefully, things don't go off with any glitches. I wanted to talk about forecasting the schedule, and in general, we'll talk about some uh, general things about our work, but then we're going to focus in on the loaners. Okay. So I always talk about getting to zero. And what I mean by that is like back in my old days, um, we would do everything in the department and we'd leave at like 11 at night and shut the lights off, and the department was clean and empty. Uh, so that's a thing of the past, clearly, right? Because nobody does that. A lot of us are 24/7 now. And the new paradigm is this. It may not even be new, but the paradigm of SPD is this. You may not get to zero. You may not get all the trays done. I encourage you to strive for that. But even if you could get to zero by a certain time, there's still going to be a hierarchy of your work. And we'll discuss a little bit of that. But we have to get done what needs to be done. And what I like to do and what we're doing right now is showing you, a lot of people come to you and say, you should work, smarter and not harder. And then they just go away. Like they don't give you the tools or ideas on how to do that. So we'll cover some of that right now. I'm going to go a little fast because I want to leave some questions for you guys on the end. And I will make this short slide deck available to you guys. So, important to know if you do case cart system or not. For those of you out there that don't pull cases for the OR, generally speaking, you're a little less in tune with the operating room schedule for tomorrow. Because when you pick cases, we're pulling things off the shelf and we're marking things missing, both throwaways and reusables. So that's how we generate what's called the needs list, or what's missing. Um, and then that helps us generate the priorities or the work that we need to work on. So you can do this even if you don't pick cases, but I'm just pointing that out. And by case cart, I mean, pulling everything down, either an SPD or some SPDs go upstairs and pull the cases in the OR. So how do we get there? What are we essentially dealing with? These are what the priorities are. And like today at 7 in the morning, I'm concerned with same day turnovers, right? I'm concerned with emergency things that just occur, right? Um, Priority sets never sit, right? Like a trauma set, you would never let sit on the shelf. Then we start dealing with what do we need for tomorrow? What are these sets that are on the pick list that aren't available and we need them sterile for tomorrow? And just as a quick point, again, there is a hierarchy of these needs. And I say that because, there is an order of operations. Your stat unknown, something drops on the floor, one of a kind, patient on the table. Okay, first and foremost, right? Stat cases come in, traumas, gunshots, what have you. Of course, that's front and center. Then you have your known same day turnovers. We're doing 4 cases with 3 sets. Um, then we start getting into priority sets that never just sit on the shelf. And then ultimately, like I said, we get into loaners and then the needs list of what are the sets that are needed for tomorrow. So just important to know, and also important to point out that if you don't establish this hierarchy or get everybody on the same page, there is a thing that I've described as priority fatigue, right? Like in ICUs and in areas where there's a lot of alarms, there's a known documented thing called alarm fatigue, where when alarms are beeping all around you, you hear no alarms, right? When everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? So you got to really establish this and get this out to the staff so that people understand sort of the order of operations, okay? And what work should I be working on now and then next and then following that? Let's focus on the loaners. I want you to start thinking about loaners and some of the concepts around them. This process always begins with the doctor. Doctors either work for the hospitals or they are contracted, so to speak, by the hospitals. But in either case, they see patients and then they put patients on the operating room schedule. What does that procedure look like at your facility? It could be different in different facilities and different processes. Could be digital. Believe it or not, hospitals are a big place where I still see a lot of fax machines, you know. So are they faxing over requests? So we'll talk about how this happens, generally speaking. But, you know, it starts in the office. The doctor sees the patient, and then the doctor has an office that he's running, and that's typically run by an office manager. That office manager may or may not be a nurse. Typically, it's an office manager, but he'll say to the office manager, I need to put Mr. Jones on the schedule for next week at XYZ hospital. So, right there, that first engagement is where information can be lost. I'm doing a total knee. I'm doing a Zimmer total knee. Okay, that's pretty vague. As you guys all know out there, there are many variations of Zimmer knee, right? Set up. So, think of that concept. Now, the doctor may or may not call the rep. The doctor may be on a case with a rep at another hospital when this schedule becomes available or they decide to book a case for a certain patient. So the doctor can be in sync with the rep or he could not be in sync with the rep. Booking, right? So the doctor speaks to the office manager. The office manager wants to get that on the operating room schedule. A primary point to make here is that the doctor booking a case is no different, in my opinion, than a prescription. You know, you wouldn't just say, you know, I'm not going to prescribe you very strong pain medication and say, just take it until you feel better. You got to be prescriptive. Take one per hour. Do not operate machinery. Whatever the thing is. Take with food. Take with water. So the case cart needs to be prescriptive, right? The way that it can be and is prescriptive is that there's a booking process, and there's usually either an electronic or a paper based booking slip. That's what the office manager sends over to the booking office to get the case on the schedule. Why is this important to us? Because it may or may not have a line or a blank space where they write in Zimmer total knee. So having and knowing that this booking slip is essential, it really is the first thing to look at because you want to have an equipment line so that when the doctor engages with that office manager, she can say, Doc, I heard you say Zimmer total knee. What kind of total knee? Do you know what version, what setup? So it could start there. And then that booking slip gets filled out and sent over to the main office. Oh, before I get into forecasting, it is here where if it says Zimmer total knee, they will put the case on the schedule. And then in the comments of the operating room schedule, they'll write in the loaners. Because loaners, as you all know, are unique. They may or may not be in our system, whether you're on paper count sheets or have a tracking system. You know, I like to refer to them as like there's known offenders, like there's known repeats that come in, but every once in a while we'll get like some sets out of left field we didn't deal with. But but they're typically there may or may not be count sheets with them. There may not be you can't just look them up or you may not have them on file. So the only thing to indicate that we need these trays is going to be on the comments of that operating room schedule. So with that being said, we got to start forecasting. Like I said, we got to get through our day. Then we got to look at tomorrow and ideally 4 more days after that. Try to do a 5-day forecast, right? So step one, printing that schedule, looking at the notes. But then there's important huddles that occur. The operating room is probably already doing this. And yes, SPD, you got to make yourself part of this. If you want to be in the know, you got to put yourself in the know, right? So try to get together. Now huddles in general need to be very specific. If I go up to the huddle to forecast the schedule, that's not the time and place to say, we messed up a tray, or hey, we were awesome yesterday, right? I mean, you could always tell us we're awesome, but it's specific. You're there to look at the schedule. If the huddle is typically, say, a half hour and you only need SPD on the back end of it, then go up for the back end of it. But the point is, you go up there and you're looking at the schedule, you're looking at those notes, and you're trying to determine what the equipment needs are, equipment being loaners. Now, after that huddle, some of you might hate me for this, but ask yourself, who is best suited to determine currently at your place, who calls the rep? Is it the booking office? Is it the doctor's office manager? Whose responsibility is it to call Matt at Smith and Nephew and say, hey, buddy, we got a case next week, and he put Smith and Nephew total knee? So figure that out, because that's a very important information. In my opinion, it's an important role for SPD. And because we know typically what loaners come in from the outside, we know what official consignment is on the shelf, and we also sort of know what that unofficial assignment is those trays that kind of just live in the pickup and drop off rooms, right? So we're best suited to really call that vendor. I call it scripting because there is a script that's developed, and I'll gladly share all this with you through Advantage. And what you'll see here is you're calling Matt at Smith and Nephew and asking him some very specific things. Matt, were you aware there's a case here next Thursday? No, I actually wasn't. And I used to get that a lot. I used to get that 8 out of 10 times when we had this implemented. But so now we're actually the ones letting the vendor know that there's a case. But then while I have Matt on the phone, I'm going to do a couple of things. Now, this is very hard to read in this format, so I'm going to just go forward and get to this slide. On that script, there's a couple of things. I'm asking, what's the type of procedure? How many trays are you bringing me? Do you know the names of those trays? Because I could have that all written down. And then I'm also reminding Matt that I have a 48-hour drop-off rule. I need IFUs. Guess what? I have a 25-pound set rule here. And I need you to kind of honor that. Hey, were these I've never seen these. I've never seen these pans, the name of these pans before. Are they approved for use? Because yes, SPD sometimes is the gatekeeper. Things need to get cleared and approved in value analysis, or a vendor won't get paid. And unfortunately, yeah, we'll be up in one of those meetings saying, why did you allow this to kind of slip through the door? But we need to make sure that this stuff is approved for use. So the script, that engagement, that forecasting with the vendor really brings a lot of value. I want you to consider it. Okay. SPD huddle. Now, in general, if you're still doing monthly meetings where you shut the department down, I mean, that's as stale as like when I started when I was 19, right? You're telling me 30-day-old information. You're shutting the department down on a Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month. So and a lot of departments do this. We do huddles per shift. It's in real time. Now, for the sake of accreditation and otherwise, and just communication, you want to document these and you want to make sure you include attendance, right? So, with that being said, this is the format I used to use. It's daily. We always start with safety. Hey, any safety issues, period. Yeah, I tripped on the sidewalk coming in. It raised up. Whatever. It could be anything. You always start with safety, right? What's today's priorities? What are we all working on as a team today? And then when we start talking about tomorrow, that's where I have the person who does the scripting. In my case, it used to be Phyllis specifically. Phyllis would come in and say, hey, I did the scripting. Today's Monday. We're going to be getting 7,200 loaners for Wednesday. Now we're in the know. Now I can say, gee, we better adjust the schedule. I better put 3 people in decontam. We've got all these loaners coming today. It's you're no longer being caught off guard. You are in the know with the loaners. A lot of people, the vendor shows up and we're mean to them. We're like, what are you doing here? You know, um, you got to give these guys a little bit of a break. I know they're a pain in the neck, but they are our partners, and they are, for the most part, doing what's best for the patient by serving the doctor and the operating room and SPD. So now you're in the know. The rep shows up. But before we get there, we're saying, hey, these trays are going to show up. So when they show up, you should have a very robust drop off list. And this could all be digitized. Like I said, this could all be in your tracking system. But I always like to do things, if you could do this on paper and then you get a tracking system, you'll just be that much better served. So the same thing. Oh, that's the huddle sheet. But drop off, I call an engagement. This says marriage is a relationship in which one person is always right and the other is the husband. So it needs to be an engagement. A lot of times the vendor shows up and you're like this, you're like, go sign the book, go sign the book. Or it's like a self-serve kiosk. The best process is to have an engagement, even if it's 2 seconds, because it could be a courier, it could be a college kid for the summer who's running around for the guy, or it could be the rep himself. You may lose valuable information if you don't have sort of that engagement. But um, like for instance, Phyllis said today there was 4 of these pans showing up, and you're only bringing me 3. Oh yeah, Dave, that's because the other one's at the hospital. I got to go get it. I'll be back later. See, that engagement is important. I get very excited, as you guys can tell. Okay, let's now get into that final phase where the vendor is dropping off these trays separately as a process. If you can work with your operating room and talk about this concept of open and hold, okay? This is where vendors typically know, the sales rep, the vendor in the room, typically, if he's bringing you 8 trays, they're only going to use 4 of them. The other ones are there because if things aren't what they expected, or it goes somewhere they didn't expect, they have it there, right? But if you're opening blindly all 8 of those trays, think of the processing wheel. It's got to come down, decontam. It should be re-inspected. We shouldn't be giving vendors debris, because if you don't treat these loaner trays well, if you don't clean them well, they're going to go in your little pickup area, and then the vendor's going to come back. And if you're not forecasting the schedule, he's going to say, guess what? It's Monday, but you need these again on Friday. So now you're giving yourself back dirty trays, right? Even though they got to go to decontam again. But hold that thought. So you got 8 pans where they're only using 4. If you can come up to an agreement with the operating room that we will label these trays open and hold, keep the hold in the core, the open go in the room. If they don't use the 4 holds, they come down the clean elevator. A lot of us use the Tyvek tags on the sets, snip them off. And because Dave's forecasting his schedule, I already know that these 4 pans are needed again on Friday. I do new Tyvek tags. They're sterile. I reallocate them. I just avoided a decontam cycle and an assembly cycle. Now, the clean pans that come down, the dirty pans that come down that had to go to decontam, I know I need those again on Friday. So I treat them as if they're going to be used on me or a loved one. They come through the wash, and instead of pushing them out in the corridor, because the minute you do that, it's got to go back through decontam, you hold them in the assembly area, and you suit the rep up just like a technician, and he restocks those on the assembly table, because that's avoiding yet another decontam cycle. They get wrapped. The 4 sterile sets are over there on the case cart waiting, and then the other 4 sets that are going to get sterilized meet up with them, and then we have our 8 trays for Friday. And once again, we label them open and hold. So I went fast. I threw a lot at you, and I want to give some time for us to either ask questions or to have a little bit of discussion.
Well, I mean, yes, you covered so much information, like
Yes,
super crunched it. I'm just like, I don't know where to start. However, we do have a couple of things in the comments that we can kick us off with, and
that's
then if
great.
anything we talk about prompts another question, put it in the comments. I think we've determined Dave loves to talk about
Vanessa,
it.
think
Yes.
about this and the audience that think of this in segments. Wow, we don't huddle. You got a great takeaway. Consider doing huddles. Hey, we don't forecast our schedule. Take it off in chunks and bits. Hey, I should probably start going up and doing the huddle to forecast the schedule. Hey, we do most of that, but I never thought about this open and hold concept. You could take away any little segments from this like Kaizen, small little changes. You don't have to bite the whole thing off at once. Okay.
Yes. Yes, I love it because yeah, if you're a place that's doing none of the things, it can look really overwhelming.
Correct.
Um, okay, cool. So, one of the first comments comes from your buddy Jameed. He says, "Let's discuss status reporting to the OR for vendor trays after they are dropped off."
That's a great point, Jameed, because, now, again, different order of business in different hospitals. Some hospitals have clinics or I'm sorry, they have like liaisons or service leaders, like the ortho service leader. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Oh, actually, the loop is this, Jameed. On Monday, we weren't sure what those loaners were or what that case was. And then, of course, on Tuesday, when we get back together, after Phyllis does the scripting, she could then report to the OR, yes, we confirmed it. You could change the notes on the schedule. It's a next gen. That's where the sort of the loop goes around. But you could certainly include that to because the service leaders typically aren't at that huddle. It's usually the OR manager and your ambulatory manager if you have one, and booking people. But those huddles could be anybody you want.
Yeah, yeah. And then you don't get the phone call, "Hey, did our loaners come in? Hey, where are they? Hey, are they ready yet?" It's like, "We got
Well,
them."
what's another important thing, and because I was going fast and covering a lot, your drop off log should differentiate whether implants are coming in sterile or not. Because SPD is always very proud. We say, I got the 8 loaners. And then at 7 in the morning the next day, the OR calls and says, where's the implants? And you're like, well, they only dropped off 8 trays. And all the implants are in those gray tubs that litter the hallway, right? So you got to make sure you could capture that on the scripting. Matt, you're bringing me 8 trays. What about implants? Dave, those are in the trays, or Dave, those are going to come in tubs. So a great point to point out.
Yep, yep. We've got another question. How do I get vendor reps to restock in a hospital that has historically had SPD doing the restock?
That brings up a great point, and I think maybe that's even a great topic for a further presentation. But here's a question for you: do you have a consignment agreement? Trust me, the vendor does. The Smith and Nephew will not leave. Any of these companies will not leave trays at your hospital unless the hospital signs their vendor agreement, their consignment agreement. So what I did at my facility is we would do amendments to that. That's where you would spell that out. You would say the vendor, we want to add an amendment for these consignments. The vendor's going to restock them. Another big one that's huge to you guys is this. You, if you're going to consign these here, Dave or the hospital is going to determine whether you could pull them out of here and go use them up the street. Because when you come and pull them on Tuesday and I have a case on Wednesday and they come back at 9 o'clock at night, I'm working for the hospital up the street. So when you consign them to me, I may say, no, I can't. The hospital up the street, you can't pull them because they're consigned here and I need them for tomorrow. But you spell that all out in your consignment agreements.
Love it. Yep. Making sure everybody follows the policy. Oh, we just had another one. Can you speak on vendor policies and how to create or implement one that works for all teams?
Sure. I mean, oh, that's great because I'm in Chicago by chance, and I'm always like over my shoulder is the HSPA building. But the board is meeting this week, which is just great information. But HSPA is actually revising and working on updating the vendor sample policy. There is one out there now, and it is a great template, but they are updating it. And Casey, I think, recently said, I don't know what the forecast for that was, whether it was 3, 6 months, but that is a great template out there that's a great example of where you don't reinvent the wheel. If you are an HSPA member, I'm not sure if you're aware that you can log in and they have an entire section with probably hundreds now of sample policies. So I mean, look, reinvent the wheel. We want creative people, but reinvent the wheel where there is no policies or where we haven't done this before. I always say the wheel's been invented, figure out a way to make it go faster.
That there you go. That's actually a really good one. I don't see any fresh questions. Do you have any final concluding thoughts, Dave, before I wrap us up?
Well, just like I said, um you would rather doing forecasting your schedule changes the dynamic from, hey, the vendor shows up, hey, what are you doing here? Because here's what happens. The 2D, just say Fantasyland, right? It's a little bit slow right now, and the decontam person says, hey, can I cut out a little early? Or so they cut out early, and then 10 minutes later the vendor shows up with the rolling cart with like 42 loaners on it, right? So
Hmm.
it changes the engagement from, hey, what are you doing here, to, hey, Matt, I was expecting you. It just changes the whole dynamic. It changes the workflow. Like I said, if I'm scripting and saying, oh my if I'm huddling and saying, oh my god, there's 52 loaners showing up today, all right, well, now I got to adjust the work schedules. So you're not getting caught off guard as much. And then that open and hold stuff on the back end is, think of all those processing cycles. That alone can save you a ton of time and money.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for hopping on our workshop and being available 2 weeks in a row.
Thank you all for coming back. And you probably have never had a guest who talks so much with their hands on a video, right?
Never. All right. Well, thank you, audience, again for joining us for ASSI's monthly workshop. And thank you to Ascenco for this collaboration. Follow us on LinkedIn for more workshops, tools, and tricks to keep your SPD running smoothly. We'll see you next time.